Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a very special episode of the OWCRA podcast. It is the group stage extravaganza, I would think some of the more exciting times here. Oops, different, that's supposed to be for later. But some of the more exciting times here in the collegiate Overwatch space because the top 64 teams in Swiss have been decided, and now we get to do some really awesome bracketeering and predictions to see who's going to make it to that top 16 bracket. I'm joined as always by my co-host Luey, and below us we have two brand new guests here. So first of all, for those who may not know you, we'll go ahead and start with Temporal. How about you introduce yourself and talk about what you do in collegiate Overwatch?
Sure, I'm Temporal. I am the coach for Northeastern University. I also have been known to do some power rankings of myself in the past, so you may have seen those around here, but happy to be here today. It's going to be fun with this crew.
And then we have TheParadoxMuse over here in the bottom right.
Hi everyone, I'm the Assistant Director of Fisher College. I also work very closely with our Overwatch team, as well as a ton of different programs here at Fisher. So excited to be here, first time on the podcast.
Absolutely. This is going to be, and you've definitely chosen a very exciting one to come on, because we've got a lot to talk about. So again, this is the group stage special. Unlike any of our other podcasts you might have seen, where we are very much like jumping from topic to topic and from event to event, and then we talk about OWCRA rankings. Obviously, no OWCRA rankings have come out since the beginning of March. We are going to be laser focused in on the group stages, breaking down each of the groups, and then, of course, each of us giving our own personal predictions on who is going to make it out. But before we get into that, we do need to have a bit of a post-mortem. If you are in chat right now, 07s for the teams that did not quite make it. I have gathered here the 16 teams that were so close to making it into the group stages, could not make it in. By the way, this is the format that we're going to be looking at throughout the day. We have the seed number, team name, link to their team page and game battles, and then their OWCRA ranking and the most recent OWCRA ranks. Again, these are like 20 days ago, so pretty outdated, but still interesting to see how it compares. As you can see, several teams that didn't make it were teams that OWCRA have been keeping an eye on, including, of course, our number 20 ranked team, Utah, just barely missing out on number 67. Guys, this is a very interesting team, and some teams that did not make it that arguably probably should have if they had an easier Swiss schedule.
No, it's actually tragic because I'm thinking back of like last semester when UTD got put up against like 4 or I don't know how many teams that are either ranked pretty highly or were at least close to being ranked. So Utah got really unfortunately placed against University of St. Thomas, St. Clair, and Maryville, and University. I was surprised they lost to University of Houston. I don't really know them too well, but that was another like unfortunate loss on their end. But man, like being put against 3 ranked teams, like not only ranked teams but very highly ranked teams, was like really tough. It's really unfortunate to see that they barely missed it by like 2 or 3 spots.
Go ahead, Temporal.
I'll take it. Fine. So I think what you have to sort of think about considering this is we always know that with our double round Swiss pretend 10 round, not really, that you're really not allowed to lose any matches that you're supposed to win. So if you're the better team, you have to be the better team every single day that you run into a team. Mm-hmm. And so I look at Utah and I can't really feel that bad because they lost to University of Houston. They're supposed to lose to St. Thomas. They're supposed to lose to St. Clair. They're supposed to lose to Maryville. You'd have a great seed if those were the 3 teams you lost to and then you won all of your other matches. But you know what? You dropped to University of Houston and you've got no business losing to University of Houston. And that's always in ABC been death. Losing to a team you're not supposed to lose to unless you do it in round 1 or 2, because then you'll never fight another good team.
A good way to think about it, too, is that essentially they would take Houston's spot. Had they beat Houston, they would probably be ranked right around that 36 mark. And so when we get to group number 4, spoilers, that's where we can actually look at and say, like, okay, if Utah was here, how would they actually perform in this group? Do we still think that they would get out? And, we can talk about that opinion there. But honestly, that's, it stinks that you played 3 really good teams. Realistically, though, you went 6-4. Were you going to make it into the third stage, or were you actually just going to drown in pools?
We can actually, we can take a look at the overall standings here. I took a quick look before I came here. I was like, should I include every team that was 6-4? But if you go down here, every team, it goes down to like 113 before we get to a 5-5 team. Like if you were 6-4. To get in the top 64, you had to have really, really, really good tiebreakers, unfortunately.
That said, I will agree with you completely, Luey, that the top 64 teams are not the top 64 teams. I think this did a pretty good job of capturing the top 20 teams are probably all in the top 64, but I actually think there are very much teams between like 25 and 60 that instead placed in the hundreds. Like if we look at Hawaii, who we just scrolled past there, they're probably actually a top 64 team. Utah definitely is actually a top 64 team, but it's the sort of thing where it doesn't capture those correctly, and we know that, and that's just the double tiebreaker thing, but they were never going to make playoffs, and I don't consider groups an accurate catch of the top 64, and I never really have. Top 16 is pretty good, top 32s have been okay, top 64 is sort of not real, in my opinion.
I was even going to say one of the teams that I don't even see listed here is Longhorn, and my second team actually ended up playing them, and they did really good. I was actually really
Longhorn
impressed with
is in groups. They got a fairly low seed, but they're in here.
Didn't know that.
They're in here. They're in here as they're in the sheet as Texas because that's the school they're from. But that's
okay. No, I see them now, number 51. So I didn't even know they made it. So I thought they drowned, but in just groups. But instead, okay. No, that's really good. So, yeah, I mean, Utah's kind of the only big tragedy of the ones that are kind of listed here.
The big tragedy, I think teams like Oklahoma and Maryland, if they had gotten there, would they have gotten the top 16? No, but I think they were in a position to maybe get some upsets in, maybe ruin the chances of another team if they had really like played up to their potential. But at the end of the day, I think Utah was the only team here with maybe an outside shot of making top 16 that got.
I'll make an objection there. I think the Ultraviolets actually had a rough time. Like if you look at the New York Ultraviolets there, they lost to ASU, Fisher, and UCI, which are all totally reasonable losses. But then they lost to Georgia Tech, and I'm not convinced Georgia Tech isn't a top 20 team. I know that's a wild wait, they've never been on our rankings, etc. But they have wins over Penn State. They have wins over UF Orange, who has a chance to make it out of groups, over Ashland University, over the Rebels. I actually think they just got caught. And yes, they should have won that Georgia Tech match if they really want to be in the mix, etc. But I actually think they're the team that really just got kind of busted by the bracket there. No, they were not going to be a top 15 team. But
imagine starting off the season 6-0 and you're feeling so good, but it feels like if you're not a top 20 caliber team, starting off 6-0 is actually a bad thing because then your last 4 matches are going to be really, really difficult. Fishermen, UCI, ASU are all some people might. I mean, ASU debatable, but some people might put all of those teams in the top 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's kind of a strat, honestly, to just lose early on, so your later matches are just much more easier. I really don't like that it's double rounds per weekend.
And as
I think before previous seasons it was longer and they did one match per weekend, which is not ideal because that's way too long in my opinion. But it is more accurate, I would say. In my opinion, from previous seasons at least.
As we do go through all the groups and look at their history in ABC, we are going to see a couple teams who are like that, who are we took a couple of losses early on in the tournaments, so then our schedule was a little easier, and then we rattled off 5 or 6 wins in a row at the end. And unfortunately, with this format, that's just going to happen. That being said, in general, it does a reasonable enough job. There's going to be snubs, but other than a couple of exceptions, I think the teams that should have been in there got in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Another.
the teams.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. I think we'd all agree that the teams that should be able to make playoffs are all definitely in groups.
Mhm.
Yep.
For sure. Another team that I wanted to take note of because this team was getting hyped up, especially at the CECC LAN, was San Diego Navy.
Yeah.
I remember one of their players like claiming that they should be watched out for. They possibly could be top 20. They made CECC the West. What is it? West? I don't know what it was.
Yeah,
Western
they
regional
made it was the
qualifiers.
rest regional, yeah.
Yeah, but then you look at their schedule, man. They took some tough losses. Like
Well,
I don't know if I
they
would ever
lost to
agree with that.
Waldorf, they lost to Pittsburgh, they lost to
I mean,
EAUCD. I mean, there's some team that, like, if they were a top 20 caliber team, they would have beaten those teams.
right, like UC Davis is like a flat 4K team, so it's just over in my opinion if you don't win
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, and I thought they did well at the Western. I don't know which team they beat. Western qualifier
Yeah.
or CECC.
I think
Exactly.
the Western qualifiers. I mean, we seem to have an issue over there, partially because of the UCSD problem, where they're so variable on land that teams beat them. I don't know that they got beat by their own second team. I don't think that happened, but clearly there's some funny business going on at land there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the West, We've talked about the West. We've talked about those servers. We've talked about, the CECC land stuff over there as well with some of the other games. But West is always going to be getting stronger and kind of growing. And
we do have mine in chat on the sorry, I cut you off. We do have mine in chat on the topic of UCSD Navy saying they had some scheduling issues and had to forfeit some games likely. So
Okay.
when it comes
Okay,
to
fair.
and when you are a West team and you have to play against an East team, that might
Mhm.
make things difficult.
mhm.
That being said, well, actually, let's take a look again. Who did they actually lose to? Or did they lose to any East Coast team? Because I saw UC Davis. I don't know where Waldorf is. Pittsburgh is in the East Coast, so that might have caused something.
I see.
Like a 3 p.m.
Waldorf
EST
is
game.
Iowa? That sounds right. Like middle area?
Waldorf?
Middle
I've
area.
looked it up before. That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the end of the day, there are some really good teams that unfortunately did not end up making the top 64. So, of course, I did want to give all the teams that almost got there but couldn't quite make it a little shout out, just saying, hey, we see you, we see the effort that you put in, and hopefully some of these teams will come back next fall and make a statement, because they really are on the edge of making something really cool happen. That being said, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we got 64 teams that did make groups to talk about and break down. So let's just start going through the list, starting off with group number 1 here. And we've got ourselves, of course, shout out to Northwood for going 10-0 in the Swiss stage. For what we said about, teams not losing matches that they should have lost. Northwood has not lost any matches. And they end up 10-0, number 1 seed, and the benefit of that is the highest seeded team, next highest seeded team is number 16. So Northwood are in a pretty solid position, but then there's a bit of a scrap for second. You've got Oregon, Blinn, Waterloo, Toronto sitting there at number 33, Forsaken, who we think might be Arizona, but not confirmed, Rowan, and then Miami, Ohio, a former OWCRA ranked team, just barely sneaking at number 64. I think we can all agree that Northwood are making it out of this group, but that second team, there's a bunch of teams that could scrap for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, props to Northwood for making a run for 10-0, but also they didn't face any of the top 3 teams, so that's something to take note of. They did beat Rutgers.
They beat the Rutgers curse though. So
Rutgers was the team that has beaten Maryville and
beat
Redbird,
Rutgers,
so.
UCI, both Fisher teams. Like they do have a bunch of solid wins on their resume.
Yeah, they have a lot of solid wins. I'm super interested to see how they do against Redbirds and who am I missing? Maryville. So we shall see. And yeah, I agree with you. This is kind of like up for grabs for not Northwood. Northwood takes the number 1 easily, but for the rest of them, there's no argument. Like I can't really pick and choose one particular team that has a better shot than another team.
You better, because in a few seconds, in a few minutes, I'm gonna force you to pick one. So you better be thinking.
I'm thinking a little bit. I'm very it's crazy that Miami barely made it 64. Props to them on that. That's super lucky, I feel like. But I think they have a good shot. Probably Toronto as well. The same teams you said. I'm looking more so at Miami, Toronto, and Blinn probably. Oregon, my team actually faces them tomorrow. So unfortunately, I don't know not much about that team until tomorrow. So, but I'll make a choice today. Blinn has been looking good, in my opinion. I think they have some decent, solid players. My team has played them before. They're not too bad. Toronto has forfeited a lot of matches recently, so I'm probably not going to pick them, to be quite honest, because they're just like off right now. And Miami, I feel like it's really a hit or miss, in my opinion, in general, previous seasons and now, like especially considering they barely made it to 64. But then again, I don't really know what teams did they even face. I'm not even completely sure.
Yeah, let's take a quick look and see how Miami got to the number 64 seed. Obviously, it means it's 6-4. Their losses are to St. Louis, UCSD, UIUC, and Toronto. So they actually lost to Toronto week 1. So they're gonna have to win that rematch.
Yeah, the big thing too is I'm pretty sure they actually forfeited their last 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure they didn't actually play the SLU or the UCSD games. So
they won versus CSULB.
Right. So I'm wondering, did they actually play those, or were those forfeits? If those were kind of forfeits, where would we actually kind of see those games too? I know a lot of schools, it's, when it's their spring break, if they don't have computers at home or they brought their computers to their dorm and they're forced off campus for spring break, that's always been a big question or big issue in collegiate. So
yeah,
it's kind of interesting to see where they might be. Just kind of when you see those 2 losses back to back, it's like, okay, did you actually play those, or did you have to end up forfeiting them, and what kind of happened there? Honestly, I think I would still, we'll talk when we get to those top 2.
Mine has confirmed in chat that Miami did show up and play versus UCSD at least.
Fantastic. Then, yeah, okay, then that's going to take a lot more into consideration. I don't think I would still pick Miami, Ohio to make it out second in this group. I'm looking more at like the Toronto, Oregon, or Blinn as kind of my, main ones. Like Toronto kind of being up there, like you said, Luey, if they show up. But Oregon and Blinn, they seem pretty dedicated into trying to show up and trying to make that push for top 16.
Yeah.
Is Oregon is UO Ducklings, right? Or am I mistaken?
Yes.
I think isn't the Ducklings the JV team? It's like UO Green.
Oh, I see. I was about to say because Blinn beat that team. Blinn has also beaten Waterloo, and they've beaten Maryland, Rutgers JV team.
I can't see Blinn getting second in this group. So I see Blinn's record in the Kentucky qualifier where they lost to Ohio State, they lost to Ball State, they lost to Converse. Ohio State just is not giving me, and this is not a good version of Ohio State. Ohio State still has the roster that maybe they could put it back together, but they have not been good this semester. And if Blinn took a loss there, took a loss to Ball State did beat Illinois Orange, so Ball State has sort of rocketed themselves back up a bit. I'm not convinced that they win that if there's a rematch, but I would have a tough time seeing Blinn winning this. I could see Toronto winning it. That's definitely a possibility. If Toronto plays at their peak, I think they do get the second spot here behind Northwood. But the problem is we don't know that because there's been forfeits recently, etc. So if Toronto doesn't show up, I actually think it's Oregon of these options. Miami, Ohio, of course, has the potential to be an amazing team, but they haven't been this semester. They've got like a 3-2 win over Ball State and then a loss to Kentucky Blue. And then, it's so messy. And I believe Fozix is playing full remote semester abroad right now when he plays at all. He's mostly coaching the team.
I've in Miami, Ohio, I've seen games that I've seen. I don't know if I've ever actually seen Fozix playing. He's definitely not playing regularly if he is.
He's not playing regularly, but he is playing some. Like he played in ESC when we played them first week. He came in for the third map, things like that. But he's not full-time playing for them. He's trying to take, I think, more of a coaching role there. And, his hours probably don't line up. So, maybe if he came back for this, they got it, they could push. But I'm going to be honest, I think them peeking back in is less likely than Toronto getting it back together.
Mm-hmm.
Toronto just needs to show up.
You're right.
Their game, and honestly, Toronto should get out second in this group. It's that question of who's going to be third, and just in case if Toronto has to forfeit, because these games are pretty. There's a lot of them in a very short amount of time.
Yes, it's true.
It's like 4 a weekend, and I mean this first weekend too is OD. There's something this weekend, even it's either OD or it's like. Some sort of trial or something like that. Like there's a big thing going on this weekend, and you might have some of these top players that are carrying these rosters that just say, I'm I'm going to go play in that. That's way more important than my college tournament, right? So there are some of those opportunities too that we have to take into consideration for a lot of these teams. But
Also,
realistically, I'm looking at Toronto, Miami, Blinn, and Oregon as the real contenders for this group, and then unfortunately Waterloo, Forsaken, and Rowan. Thank you for your season.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Also, Toronto, to take note, they actually beat Miami in the Swiss. I didn't see that until now. So
Yes.
yeah.
That was week 1, though. That's a long time ago in collegiate season.
That is forever ago.
Yeah. But yeah,
So,
I think I'd agree.
Are we ready to start? Are we ready to start giving our preds?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we can all agree that Northwood number 1, but whoever. So 1A is the team you think is going to be number 1 that come out first, and then 1B is the team you think is going to come out second. Who would like to start us off?
So
I'll do it. It's going to be Northwood that wins. Obviously, no surprise there. And I am going to put it on Toronto. I think they want this enough. I think they want to be relevant. They'll figure enough out to beat these teams.
Absolutely. So we got Northwood Toronto from Temporal. I will go
point,
next.
you might as well just put Northwood for all of us at this point.
Oh yeah, I'll go. Yeah, I mean everyone's picking Northwood to go out first, obviously.
Yeah.
Number 2, and so I want to tell you all my mindset before I make this decision is that I could just be 100% analytical and go with the team that I want to do the most, but I think what's more fun is as a caster, obviously I'm not going to do anything super outlandish, but as a caster, I'm super interested in different storylines and if a team went through, what kind of stories, what kind of matchups would that make? And I think a really cool storyline is the number 64 seed coming up and making it the top 16. Is it an outside chance if Toronto shows up? Yes. Is it even a guarantee against Blinn and Oregon? Probably not. But my goodness, give me Miami, Ohio, getting it to the top 16.
Okay.
I can respect it.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'll go next. It's a little tough, but I'm not going to choose Toronto because I've just seen too many forfeits from them lately. They forfeited against my team, and they said I think they told one of their players told me they just were down players in general. Lately. Well, that's when they forfeited us. Maybe that changed. So I'm not going to choose Toronto, unfortunately. UO hasn't. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think have taken any tough losses. But I'm not super familiar enough with them and I don't really know like their full strength enough to really justify why me putting them second. So I don't think I'm gonna choose them either. I think my choice would have to be Blinn. I know they're kind of a little bit on and off right now, but I'm much more familiar with that team, and my team has actually faced them, and I know that they're really, really, really passionate. They have some passionate players. Obviously, they're always in our chat and always on Twitter and stuff, and they're fully confident in their abilities and being able to take these wins over these bubble teams. So, and they even feel like they are top 20 level. So I think I'm going to choose them. Mostly because I'm familiar with their team and what the potential they have, I think, and their drive.
Cool. All right, so we have 3 different picks. Paradox, you want to go Oregon and complete the circle?
I think I am just to do it, but I am gonna say that like if Toronto shows up, they win. And I do want to point out that Toronto did show up for their NACE matchup most recently. That was the NACE matchup to make playoffs and everything. So my brain is saying Toronto, but the content generator in me wants to put Oregon here, so I'm going to put Oregon here.
I respect the hell out of you for that one.
Oregon's been great. They've been really pushing it. Honestly, they're already number 2 in their group, right? They have some really good wins. They beat SCAD, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to put this one out here, too, for the group. They beat GMU, and GMU technically beat Northwood in NACE by forfeit. So just going to put that out there.
Transitive property, baby.
Oh
yeah,
this is the
content, right? So
this is the logic that everyone in the Twitter replies uses.
Exactly.
We beat this team, and that team took a map off of Northwood. So basically, we took a map off of Northwood.
Oh, that's how it
Exactly.
works.
Yep. Oregon beat GMU. GMU technically beat Northwood by forfeit. Therefore, Oregon's even better than Northwood. But I think Northwood will show up on that day. Just
Okay.
call it a hunch. So we'll put Oregon number 2 here.
Heck yeah. I love it. I love that we're all content brained here. So that is locked in. We're not touching that for the rest of the pod. As we move on to group number 2, everybody. We've got ourselves, of course, Redbirds, who took an unfortunate loss to Rutgers a few weeks ago, but has rebounded, gotten themselves the number 2 overall seed. You've got SCAD in here, Northeastern, so, that's Temporal's team. I'm sure you've got plenty to say about that. Florida is also a bit of a sneaky player. Georgia Tech, who we've already mentioned, is also a team that we've started paying attention to recently. Binghamton and Kennesaw State are 2 kind of sneaky teams who have made noise in the past. Binghamton got a pretty nice win recently against, I think, Bryant and Stratton in, I think, the AVGL series. And then Minnesota in here to round this out. A lot of really interesting teams, interesting players in this one. Again, Redbirds are making it out, but you could go a lot of different ways with the number 2.
I like this group a lot. I like this group a lot because while Redbirds are definitely getting out, we do see a situation where reasonable minds can completely differ on, does SCAD get out? Does Northeastern get out? Does Florida get out? Does Georgia Tech get out? Those are all reasonable picks, and anyone who says they're not hasn't been paying close attention. So this is a really fun one. And even Binghamton, they beat BSC, they beat Miami, Ohio. So you can't totally discount that. It's not going to happen because, we beat them last weekend. We'll do it again. But hey, it's there. What I actually think is going to happen in this group is the number 2 team is not going to have a perfect 6-1 record where they only lost to Redbirds. I think this is a group where there's going to be some messy trade arounds, and a team that lost twice is going to get the second spot. Yeah. I also think Northeastern is going to get that second spot because, I'm coaching them. But also, they're good.
So, go ahead. Keep going. Sorry.
No. I'm good. Go ahead.
I was going to say the team that takes the map off Redbirds is the team that makes it out from this. Because it is additional tiebreakers, does come down to map record if it's a 3-way tie, right? So the team that takes a map off Redbirds is the team that makes it out. Is that SCAD? Is that Northeastern? Is that Florida? I'm not sure. Honestly, I think Georgia Tech is good, but I think that those 3 teams that I mentioned are the ones that are going to turn it on for this event. I don't think, unfortunately, Georgia Tech is going to make it out of this group. They can prove me wrong. Binghamton, yeah, they have the good win versus BSC, but honestly, I think that BSC wasn't prepared for how decent Binghamton was. Minnesota, probably going to be the bottom of this group, and then Kennesaw State. I mean, it's Kennesaw. They've been good in the past, but unfortunately this past semester they've kind of fallen. Yeah. So for me, I'm looking at the SCAD, the Northeastern, and the Florida, and it's going to be who takes the map off Redbirds.
I do want to take a quick point. You did mention Georgia Tech. I do want to talk a little bit more about them because this is a team that has kind of entered the OWCRA eye in the last couple of days, just because in a league where there's the top 10 teams are pretty well established, and then it's just an absolute cluster of teams after them where everybody is losing to everyone else and is very difficult to order. You've got a team in Georgia Tech who, at least right now, I'm looking at them. They have some pretty solid wins. They won UCLA, St. Louis, New York, and when it comes to teams they've lost to, there's no one here that they shouldn't have lost to. And I think that is actually something that's pretty valuable this semester, especially when things are so messy.
Yeah. Also, if you look at SLU, they have beaten Miami, they've beaten Ball State, they've been Kennesaw's okay, but those 2 wins are pretty solid, honestly. And I'm sorry, what is this team called again? Georgia Tech. Yeah, for them to actually take the win off SLU, I think that's definitely something big to take note of. For me, it's a little tricky for the rest of these teams because I've always been a Florida fanboy because I like those guys a lot, and Florida did beat SCAD in the Swiss. And I don't know, there was another one they had too that was pretty
Yeah,
They
solid.
beat SCAD and they beat
Um,
Toronto and they beat
beat
Penn
Toronto.
State. Those are all good wins.
Yeah,
I mean, Penn State
they-
isn't amazing, but
Yep. So Florida has taken some solid wins as well. So it's a bit of a. I feel like it's a bit of a toss up between those two. Of course, Temporal Northeastern has always been pretty solid, so that's a decent choice as well.
Mhm.
I don't know. SCAD has been kind of off in the beginning of the season, but has kind of turned it up recently. But they lost to UF like pretty. I mean, how long ago was that? Like 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah, not
So
super long ago.
yeah, so not super early in the season, so it's a little bit later in the season. So I don't think SCAD should be even an option, to be quite honest. I like those guys a lot, but their results just don't really make it for them. But yeah, it'd be like I think a toss up between Northeastern Florida and Georgia Tech in my mind.
I mean, the problem with that argument is Florida lost to the Ultraviolets, right? So like if we're doing the SCAD can't be in play because they lost to Florida, Florida lost to the Ultraviolets who didn't even make group. Yeah, it's just so tough. Sorry.
Yeah,
Go
it
ahead.
is tough. It is tough for sure.
And you know who beat
Good point.
Ultraviolets? Georgia Tech.
Yeah, there you go.
So, like, if you're going to make that argument too, yeah, their third match right there was Ultraviolet, which they won. My question would be to you guys is, where do you guys currently have SLU?
Yeah. St.
Give me a
Louis is
range.
I don't know. I've always been
So-
pretty high on Ball State, so honestly, that's a really good win for them. And Ball State, I don't even know where Ball State was in our rankings.
Ball
maybe it's
State was
16?
like 18
Yeah.
ish.
And SLU has some decent players. I know Pascal, and the rest of them are fairly okay as well. So I don't really know. I mean, they're definitely like a bubble team. Definitely, like maybe like between like I don't even know. Maybe like around 25, maybe like 20. I don't even know. I couldn't tell
Well,
you.
where does the bubble start? Does it start at 15? Does it start
My-
at 18? Does it start at 10?
That's-
Because it might start at 10 with
And that's the question that I wanted to kind of get that rolling, where it's like, okay, if we say that like SLU is 25, Georgia Tech somewhere in like the 24 range, and it's like, okay, they're going to be competitive against the SCAD Northeastern, which like SCAD and Northeastern, I feel like are in that 20 to 25 range because they've had weird losses,
Right.
whereas the Georgia Tech and SLU are in that range because they've had good wins. So are you taking more onus on weird losses, or are you taking more onus on good wins? And that's how you're going to rank this group.
For sure.
So, I'm a big proponent of teams turning it on for playoffs. Why? Because I coach. Well, I don't coach, but I, have a team that is very much like turn it on for playoffs kind of team.
Yeah.
So like, I'm looking at that more. When I'm looking at it, that's why it's like Georgia Tech. You're watching this. Prove me wrong. I'd love to see it. At me on Twitter when you prove me wrong. Like, do it.
Absolutely.
Oh. Cool.
So
That's all I got.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to say before we start locking in the Preds?
I guess the last thing I wanted to say, I know y'all brought up one of the teams taking a map off Redbirds, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I think it's really realistically just depends on who takes the wins over the other teams below Redbirds.
I think it might be about. Sorry, I think it might be about which team. It's not about which team takes a map off of Redbirds. It's about which team doesn't lose a map to the Binghamtons and to the Kennesaw States.
That's fair too.
Could be that. Again, I think it's going to be messy, and that the second team is going to have a second loss. And yeah, then it'd be about either finding a map somewhere.
Isn't the Pro-Am part of this weekend too? Sorry to interrupt.
The Pro-Am literally started at the same time as this podcast. So yeah, that is actively going on. So
I mean,
Redbirds.
then you have the suggestion of, does Liar play with Redbirds? Do they put in Deco? Right? And do they have to use Deco versus SCAD? Do they have to use Deco versus Northeastern? If that's the case, then I can see them dropping a map. Right? There is a chance there, but that's, just some things to put into the minds of people that are kind of watching these games.
For sure.
But I do also agree that I think Redbirds is one of those teams that likes to turn it on for playoffs, so it would be a little bit less likely to see that, but I wouldn't be surprised if I saw that. That's how I'm going to frame it.
So I think we'll start with Temporal Pred here, because I think you're the most predictable.
I have to put Northeastern. I can't not put it. Now, we're also, the best behind Redbirds in this group, but even if I didn't feel that way, I have to say it. Let's not kid ourselves.
I like it.
Absolutely, fair enough. That's why I started with you. I am actually going to agree with you here. I'm also going to put Northeastern. I think of the teams in here, I think they have the team with the highest potential peak, and I think that this is a team that can definitely, when it comes to playoffs, turn it on. I think they will put away the 2-0 teams when they need to. I think teams like SCAD, I could definitely see them losing a map here or there to a team that they shouldn't. And I think that's where Northeastern's going to get the edge, and that's where they're going to come out in second place.
Mm-hmm. I can go next. So for me, I mean, obviously Redbirds. Again, I don't think they're going to drop a map, or it's not even going to be close with them.
Yeah,
But
you can put me right.
for my second one, yeah, like I said, it's a very much a toss-up, but I'm going to choose University of Florida. I'm a bit biased, but also, yeah, they took the win over SCAD, and I know it's like, really, that's all over the place with like those teams below like top 20. It's just like, it's just back and forth all over the place. So maybe that doesn't really matter. But also, I did watch their match versus ASU, which is a team that beat Converse, who has played my team, and ASU has been very, very solid. Came out of nowhere, has been top. I think they're top 12 right now, like in the rankings. So, and the match was actually not like, it was kind of close. It was closer than I expected. So, I'm gonna just pray on that and bet on that, and yeah, pick Florida for this one, I think. And also the fact that they have some decent wins as well. That's on the Swiss season.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do, obviously, Redbirds number one. I don't think that there's any team here that can challenge them. Again, it's the debate if they can take a map off of them or whatever. I'm looking at Scan more and more, and I didn't pick Toronto, the last one, because, again, of the whole, like, are they going to actually show up? But I think I am going to go Scan number two here. I think that Scan has that capability to show up during these
Absolutely.
big games, make that push for the playoffs and everything. However, again, like Northeastern Florida, both of those teams very, very easily number two in this spot. I think it is those three teams, but I think SCAD is the one that does show up on these weekends, puts a really big importance on these matches, and comes out number two in this group.
Hmm. I was also leaning more towards SCAD as well. That was, yeah, it was a little bit rough.
SCAD has
Uh,
definitely put
it,
some decent wins on their resume over the last couple of weeks. I do have to give it
mm,
to them. I've been very low on them in the past, but they have kind of picked things up a bit, and maybe they are getting hot at the right time.
yeah, and they have like contenders players as well with experience. So maybe they just turn it like, sometimes contenders players just don't like take it seriously. I mean, that's just a case by case basis. I don't think they're actively in contenders anymore, but maybe they have the mentality. It's just a known thing. So maybe they turn it up for playoffs and are able to handle like all these matches within one day and are able to lead their teams to beating these other teams. So definitely could happen. I think I wouldn't be surprised if SCAD took the second spot.
SCAD's roster should have better results than it does, but it hasn't this season. That'll just
Right.
be
Yeah,
my
Mm-hmm.
comment there. Like SCAD's
yeah.
roster is good, even though they lost their DPS players. There's still plenty of talent there, and it should be a better team than it has been.
Yeah. So that is group 2 dealt with. Moving on to group number 3 here. This is a bit of an interesting one because the top seeded team here is Harrisburg, a team that has at times looked vulnerable over the course of this semester. That being said, you've got a bunch of teams here who have also looked very vulnerable and down at times. Bellevue and Ohio State, I think are the two most well-known players. You've also got Grand Canyon and Texas teams and Pittsburgh teams that could potentially pull off an upset, and of course the Rutgers Reign and UC Berkeley rounding out the team. When I look at this team, honestly, this group, I honestly see a bunch of teams that have disappointed in one way or another this semester. And this could be, in all fairness, this could be a way for them to like right the ship in time for the top 16. But that just seems to be the common theme.
Even though Harrisburg has had their issues, they're probably going to get out number one in this group. They're still a very strong team. They're still, have really good showings just in general against some of like the weaker opponents. Honestly, in the Swiss stage, I'm trying to remember any of their like bad losses. Yeah,
They
okay, they've
have
lost to
beaten
Maryville.
Converse and they have beaten Georgia Tech. They beat Boise State. Like
Yep.
they had like a moment, like very like maybe a month ago where it was like, oh, this is looking like, oh, will the team fall apart? No, they put it back together and they have put up solid wins against other ranked teams.
Look
They're
at
still
that bracket though. Like that's a crazy bracket. When your worst team is what, Chico State, right?
yeah.
Basically is, or Serendipity.
Yeah, no.
I'm not sure of those two teams. You're playing Oklahoma, who's a top 40 team, St. Clair, who's top 20, top 10, whatever you want to call it, Edgewood, who's top 40 according to some of the stuff online, Boise is top 10, Converse is, at the height of their season was top 10. Georgia Tech, we've been talking about them having really good wins. Like this is a hard bracket, and to only come out of this with one loss, like you got to give Harrisburg their consistency, even though they've had some weird losses here and there.
Absolutely.
And losing TAP was not good, too. That's obviously a big hit to them from fall semester to spring semester. TAP now on Rutgers, the main Rutgers, this being Rutgers B in this group. So for me, this looks like similar to the first two groups that we've had, where there's like a clear number one, and then there's kind of a question mark of where the number two sits and who it's going to be. Ohio State has been slumping in a lot of their games as of recent. The 14 that was earlier this month, a lot has changed this month.
Yeah, a lot of. I think a lot of people, if we were to re-rank at this second, they probably wouldn't rank Ohio State at all.
I don't think Ohio State would make top 25 even. I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They've definitely kind of tumbled way, way down. But I mean, then you look at what is it? Then you look at Bellevue, and Bellevue's got some weird losses too. The UIUC, and ASU Flow Free Gamers, right? So there's some strange wins there. And then you look at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh doesn't really have any wins.
Yeah, let's see. Who did Pittsburgh actually play?
Pittsburgh actually lost to Oklahoma, which actually
I don't
sucks.
think Bellevue has wins either, to be honest. Like
They've
at
lost.
all.
So yeah, they lost. Sorry, we're looking at Pittsburgh right now. Their losses are Oklahoma and St. Louis, which
that's got a sting. Oklahoma barely missed top 64, and they beat this team who qualified. So
and then you like their last two games of the season were against Wisconsin Stout and like Kentucky White, which I'm not sure if that's like their second team or their third team. You've got Delaware who barely missed out. Like you don't really like. The only teams that are made, the only team on here that might be in the rankings right now is St. Louis, who they lost to.
And I was going to ask, is there any teams listed in Pittsburgh's wins that made these playoffs? I'm trying to think, like Kentucky didn't, Stout didn't, UB made it, I think. LSU missed, Delaware missed, Oklahoma missed.
I think it's just St. Louis.
Just like, and they lost to them, right? So they have no wins on a top 64 team, and I'm doing air quotes for 64. So it's like, it's kind of like that weird fake number 19. They're kind of there. It makes it kind of strange. I will say to Bellevue though, my thing with Bellevue is that like, they don't have any good, they don't have like crazy good wins. They do have a win over GCU, which is in their group. Just both club and normal, and I know I see you smiling there, Temporal. Like GCU, it's GCU. Regardless, it's a very weird pick. So, for me, I'm still gonna say that there's a clear one, and then I have no clue who's gonna come out number two. I could see 2 or 3 of these teams realistically coming out as number 2.
It is pretty wide
open.
Yeah, go ahead.
For Ohio State, I just want to say, like a month or two ago, and I was like, why are they still in the rankings? They have not been showing up. I was very surprised that they were still currently number 14, and they should definitely not be top 20 at all. They've been just slacking so much recently. So, just the fact that they've just been kind of on the just going downhill, I would not even put them number 2.
Now, Ohio State does also compete in NECC and some other things, but I'd say their best win when it comes to ABC is probably against Slug Gaming, and that's a team that didn't make it.
Yeah. As for like the other ones, yeah, I mean, like y'all said, it's a bit of a toss up. But if I were to really put like the best chance, just I mean, all these wins and losses just kind of all over the place, like just in general, like that's just the general trend. Um, but Bellevue, like half their roster is pretty much actively in contenders, and I'm very confident that they're gonna just turn it up in playoffs. I think they will, unless somehow they're missing some of their players for pro am. I don't know which one of their players, or if they are participating in any contenders events recent or that conflicts with the what is it, round robin. But if they're able to all show up, fully rested, and they have that experience, then they will, like, I think they'll show up if they need to. If they will, 100%.
Agreed. Yeah.
I
I
do
think
want
Bellevue
to.
is the safe pick.
Yeah, it's a safe pick for sure. I do want to quickly bring up Longhorn Gaming Texas because this was a slight conversation. Yeah, we got Paradox humping your arms, and I want you to talk about this because you're actually very high on this team.
Okay, so a couple things too in this bracket. Again, I hate game battles, okay? I can't tell if those are forfeits or if they actually were games played. That is during their spring break. I do want to point that out that their 2 losses to UNLV and Forsaken were during their
So
spring break.
they could have
So I have no
potentially
idea.
just forfeited their spring break games.
And when they played Navy, they showed up. They played very, very, very well against my second team there, right? I was impressed with them. Do I think they make it out of this group? No. I think they could have probably made it out of a couple of other groups, but I was still impressed with Longhorn. I think, and this is a club team too, so like it is reasonable to presume that they potentially did forfeit during their spring break. So
This is
again, I think
definitely
if
the
they're
kind of team that a Bellevue or an Ohio State could overlook and end up losing a
Yes.
map or even a match to.
and I think that would probably be the difference maker is does one of those Bellevue or Ohio State not, and even maybe in GCU, like not show up that day and play Longhorns appropriately, and do they get taken out?
Yeah, I think Texas is definitely like the sleeper pick in this group to maybe not get out, but to definitely cause chaos. And not make it like a clean 7-0, 6-1, 5-2, whatever. Do we want to talk a little bit about GCU here? Because it seems like, they were ranked fairly highly in last week's rankings. Obviously, they've fallen off since then. Ranked fairly low in NECC, but they're still hanging around.
They lost to Bellevue, so
They lost to Bellevue. They lost to Waterloo, Ashland, Bellevue. There's some pretty tough losses here, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
So
And it's their losses aren't during, like, there's not 2 losses in a row, so it's like you would typically see those 2 losses if it is a spring break. They may have forfeited one and then was able to reschedule another, but there's some rough losses on here that honestly I wouldn't expect them to do super well. But they have the talent to potentially make it out of the group.
Yes. It would probably take some pretty big slip ups from Bellevue and Ohio State, though. I think those are the 2 main options that you'd want to go with, along with Harrisburg, out of this group. And for anyone else to make it out, it would take mistakes from them most likely.
I'm sorry, from Bellevue or who? For someone else to get out?
Bellevue or Ohio State.
I mean, maybe. Like, I agree on Bellevue. It would take mistakes from Bellevue. Bellevue hasn't really put up quality wins, but again, that's sort of the whole central piece of this. No one has put up any quality wins. Again, I'm looking at Kentucky qualifiers. Ohio lost to Ball State. They lost to CIU. CIU and Ball State aren't amazing at this
Yeah.
point. So I don't know that I consider this like, oh yeah, if Bellevue's asleep, Ohio gets it. I could see Cal or even some versions, not this semester's Rutgers second team, but Rutgers second team is pretty decent, I would say. They're probably Longhorn Gaming caliber, UC Berkeley caliber. Those are some okay teams. None of these teams really belong in the playoffs besides Harrisburg, except maybe Bellevue. So, yeah.
Okay. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
also,
Maybe I'm just ranking Ohio. Maybe this might just be my Ohio bias showing. So.
Hey, no, Ohio was great last semester, and we expect Ohio State to play better than they have. And the truth is, they could go, hey, we're going to a LAN, it's playoffs time, let's hop on and let's do 6 scrims a week and get it back, and they could get it back. It's the same roster. Like, they could totally do that. Picking Ohio State as your second team isn't wild by any means. It's just something has to really change, and it has to change. They haven't been playing well enough, even against teams that they should be able to phone it in against.
yeah, they have some damn good players that are experienced, so it wouldn't be like completely silly to want to rank them number 2. But just considering just the general trend they've been going recently, it's just I don't know, it ain't it for me. And also, UC Berkeley actually did beat CIU, which I think you just mentioned that in the Kentucky
Right.
land they qualifiers that Ohio State lost to them. So
Yeah.
you know,
These are actually, you look at Cal, you got Maryville, losses to Maryville, St. Thomas, St. Clair, Toronto. Those are all pretty quality losses. So I think, definitely also not a team to sleep on in this group. This could be
also...
this is I could really see Harrisburg going 7-0 and then just an absolute slaughter fest with teams taking games off of other teams underneath them.
And I think Luey was going to point this out. You got like 2 quality wins there too. Binghamton isn't terrible, and CIU isn't terrible. Like, and for Cal, those are 2 of their wins in ABC.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too because that team being I don't really know Binghamton too well, to be honest, but they actually just recently beat Bobcats, which I know Bobcats has been going downhill, but if you look, their roster on paper is still pretty solid. So for them to take that win over Bobcats, like, it's still pretty notable. And for this team, Cal, to take that win over Binghamton is a notable win, I would say. So maybe a sleeper team.
So
who knows? But I would still go Bellevue regardless.
Yeah, with that, I think we've discussed enough about this team. Let's lock in the Preds. Luey, are you saying you're going with Harrisburg, Bellevue?
Yeah, Harrisburg number 1, Bellevue number 2.
Fair enough. I am probably feeling pretty similar. I just don't have enough confidence in anyone else. You know what? No, I'm gonna let my Ohio bias ring proudly. I'm gonna put in Ohio State for the content.
I mean, that could be real. Like, it's not just the content. They could go, we've got a LAN, we've got playoffs, we're just forget our schoolwork, we're scrimming this week.
And
for sure,
forget your schoolwork.
We've seen them at their high, like a very high, but like the potential they had. I remember they were like, I think they were top 10 at a point or like around there. So they have that potential, but can they really pull together? That's the big question.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm just going to throw my predictions out there. Harrisburg number 1 for this, but I think the difference maker, I think it is like between Bellevue and Ohio, but I'm going to pick Bellevue here because I think the big difference maker is I know Bellevue has a dedicated coach for their Overwatch team. Like, that is that person's background. I forget his name, but he was really awesome. I met him at the Hugh Fest LAN this past fall. When we ended up playing against them, and like, I think that is the big difference maker of turning it on for playoffs. Yeah, they are slumping, but they have the contenders experience. They have a dedicated staff member specific to their Overwatch team. I do think that is the big difference maker and what actually pushes them over the edge.
That is interesting to point out.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Temporal, what do we got from you?
I mean, it's Harrisburg. Harrisburg is just going to clean up in this group. There's no question. But behind that, I want to say Ohio State because I want to believe in them. I want to say Cal because I can see that storyline, but I have to go with Bellevue by the numbers.
Yeah, that's fair. I am very specifically being a contrarian here.
It's okay. It's okay.
No, I respect it. I partially picked Blend because they're in Texas, so I get it.
I'm going to shout out Longhorn. They're going to get 4th in this group. Just going to throw that out there. Even though they're currently 7th in this group, they're going to get 4th. That's my group prediction. So
I mean, yeah, Grand Canyon's free. I know I'm creating haters here, but Grand Canyon's the worst team in this group.
So, but yeah.
Oh yeah, it really is just Harrisburg at the top, and then this group could be so many. It could be so many different orders at the end of it. I'm really excited to see what it ends up being, but we gotta move on to group number 4 here. as we
Dun,
take
dun,
a look
dun.
at. Yeah, this is an interesting group. We've got obviously OWCRA rankings are pretty are outdated, but having 10, 11, and 12 here is fascinating. Obviously, St. Clair is going to top this one out as one of the more theoretically weak number 1 seeds in the group. Like, this is like the first time I see the highest seed that could potentially get upset by another team here. You have UC San Diego, who have high highs and low lows. Converse sitting down here at number 29, just throwing a wrench into things. And then teams like RPI, Houston, and RIT, who may not get top 2, but have the potential. RIT maybe less so. RIT's taken some tough losses recently, but the potential to pull off some upsets.
No, I have to be mean here. Tell me about these high highs this semester dividing. Tell me about the high highs of UC San Diego this semester.
This
because
semester,
I can think of one good win.
You know what? The silence is deafening.
Okay,
they came in second place in the West Regional for CECC, and other than that, when they've come, I'm thinking of times where they've played against teams that are near or above their pedigree, and they have lost those pretty consistently.
Right, and don't get me wrong, I know they get good scrims. I know they had the Cinderella story last semester, them and Rutgers, and ultimately they, beat Rutgers. Like, don't get me wrong, I know why we want to rank them highly. I totally do. And they do have a win on Boise, but Boise got it back and, righted that ship, etc. in a more recent match. So, and Boise's a really good team to have a win on. Don't doubt that by any means. But their next best wins are like Miami, Ohio, Utah, UCLA. Like, those are not teams that get you rated in a place that you compete with St. Clair or Converse. So yes, is it true that any of these 3 teams, UCSD, St. Clair or Converse, in theory could win this group, and the heights of all 3 of these teams are higher than, the expected level? Like, all 3 of these teams, I'd actually say St. Clair is probably the most consistent, but like UC
Sure.
San Diego and Converse both have a lot of variability to them and could win the group. Yes, but for me, it's easy. UC San Diego doesn't get it. Maybe they turn on that playoff magic and they want it bad enough, etc. And they did get through with a pretty reasonable seed here from Swiss with their 13. But to me, this is St. Clair followed by Converse, and it has to be that.
Interesting. St. Clair, look at their schedule. Can we pull that up?
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
just peeking at this a while ago.
Yeah.
Like, they definitely had a good bracket, like good wins in their bracket and everything. You can see obviously the Converse win at the very end. That's going to be the one that we kind of have to point to
Yeah.
and everything. But Georgia Tech, we were just talking about them and being high on them. California, we just finished talking about them. Utah, who barely missed playoffs, was a top 20. Kennesaw, a team that's top 40. And then your losses to Harrisburg, that's your one loss in this bracket. Also fighting Oregon. Like, that's a hard bracket, and to go consistently 9-1 is important here.
That is true.
I wouldn't be surprised to see, like, at first, when I first saw this group, I know my brain said, okay, I'm going to look at the 3 teams that, we hear a lot about: Converse, UC, SD, and then St. Clair. Like, those are the ones that I'm going to immediately gravitate towards. And my brain's like, okay, it's probably going to be one of those 3. And I was kind of in a toss-up situation of, like, who actually gets out. But looking at St. Clair, their performance and how things have been going, they are the most consistent team in this group. And probably they should get out either first or second in this group, and then it's really a fight for, does a team beat them and knock them into the 2 seed, or who's going to end up taking that 2 seed.
I mean, honestly, this is a really good point. I think you're absolutely right. After looking at the schedule for St. Clair, they've had a really tough go at it, and they have come out on top more often than not. They have absolutely earned the number 4 seed in this particular case, and if they are keeping up the same level of play, they are definitely making it out. I'm still not 100 billion% convinced that it's going to be number one. I think if Converse plays up to their potential, they could absolutely beat St. Clair. But it was literally last week that they lost to St. Clair. So it might just be a variability. Maybe I don't know. With Converse, it's very much a week-to-week thing, unfortunately.
Converse will tell you that they're trailing down, but I think they've sort of finished trailing down, and now we'll have to see what they do.
Mm-hmm.
They had a hard last 3 matches. Literally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like,
UCI,
top-
Harrisburg, St.
top 10
Clair.
teams.
That's
a
rough.
crazy
Yeah.
short amount of time. And if I'm Converse, I'm preparing more for the Harrisburg win or the Harrisburg game, right?
Mhm.
If I'm coaching
Right.
and working with that, I'm way more focused on trying to win the Harrisburg game. And then it's like, okay, at this point, I've dropped that game. I've already locked myself in the playoffs. Do I actually put my all into this St. Clair game, right?
Mhm.
That's what I would be looking at. So that's why I'm not 100% locked in on St. Clair getting first in this group. I am pretty, and I'm spoiling, but I'm locked into St. Clair getting out of this group.
Mhm.
Yes, I think that's the safest team to get out for sure, whether it's in first or second. Their peaks is probably not as high as Converse or UC San Diego.
Yeah, that was a good point you made. I'm glad you brought that up, B. I was thinking the same thing. That actually happened to my team. Like I don't know if it was last semester or last year, but we were like hard focused on prepping for Northwood, our Northwood match. I don't remember what team we faced after that, but we lost to them, and we shouldn't have lost to them. But it happens. I think it was that time when it was Utah when we lost to Utah and we went 6-4 in the Swiss last semester. We were hard prepping for Northwood. Going to our match next Utah, we were kind of boomed because it was a little bit close. And we were like hard prep for it, and we put in so much work, and we just lost to them. And then we went into Utah, we just didn't have our mentality there, and we lost. So that might have happened the same thing for Converse. I don't really know. Like there could have been a lot of different factors. So that's definitely something to consider. And that's the big point I would make there. And I would I honestly kind of, I mean, somebody brought this up that St. Clair had like a really good run. Like I'm not fully in agreement with that. I don't really think like they face Converse and Harrisburg. Like the rest of the teams are just honestly kind of whatever to me. They're all toss up teams. So I think that them getting 9-1, props to them, congratulations, that's good. But it's not anything like super special in my opinion, to be quite honest. So I'm not super high on St. Clair. And I know how Converse can play. They beat my team early this season, and I'm very familiar with their players. And I'm gonna be a little bit biased to them because my team does scrim them pretty often. So it's a little bit of a toss up there, but I would probably lean a little bit more towards Converse for me at least.
Yeah, absolutely fair. I do also want to give shout outs to teams. The sleeper teams in this bracket, I think, are mainly RPI and Houston. I don't think either of them are making it out of this bracket. I think either of them could give trouble to any of the other teams that we're expecting to get out of this bracket. Just teams to keep an eye on, matchups to keep an eye on for sure. That honestly, St. Clair, I think, is more consistent than giving them credit for, but they could definitely drop a match that they aren't expecting to.
St. Clair's been super, super consistent with their matches.
Yeah.
That's my whole take there.
I think
Mhm.
They're
UCSD
very
could
disciplined.
maybe drop to Houston or Red or RPI. I don't
I'm
think. I think
curious.
St.
So
Clair will get
Houston's-
first.
Oh,
second.
Houston lost to Penn State is kind of rough. They lost. I don't even know what CSULB is. I don't remember right now, but they lost to them.
California State University, Long Beach.
Long Beach. There you go. And then they lost
They
to
have-
UCI.
They have 2 bad losses and 1 good win for me in Houston. It's like, okay, so that's going to put them 4th through 6th in that group. I don't see Houston getting out. I see them being competitive with some of those top teams, but I don't see them getting out. I think at the end of the day, they're losing their games 2-1, 3-1, whatever you want to call it on, whatever maps it might be, right? So competitive, but they're going to drown in pools.
I do want to give Houston a shout out because I think that as like an Overwatch program, they've taken a really big step forward this year. But they are still. I don't think they're at that point yet.
Yeah, what was that win that they took recently that was pretty solid? Like randomly, it was SCAD or wait?
Are you
I don't remember
talking
what
about
team it
in ABC or in something else? Because I know they play in
they-
NECC as well.
No, they beat Utah. That was the
Yeah.
win. Yeah, that was the win that really bit the bullet. I don't know if I'm saying that right. That really just ended it all for Utah to get their chances in here. So
Mm-hmm.
that's actually they should that was a team that they shouldn't have lost to according to our results and the information we had. But it happens.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts before we give our predictions? I take the silence as a no. All right. I will go first this time because I don't think I've gone first yet. I'm trying to give hot takes where I can here. My hot take is going to be, which probably isn't that much of a hot take, maybe a lukewarm take. I think this is the first one where we don't see the number 1 seed get out as number 1. I think Converse is going to turn it on. They're going to be the number 1 seed, and then St. Clair will come in as the number 2 seed. UCSD, obviously, I still think they have a shot, an outside shot, but I think they are going to end up 3rd place here.
All right, I can go next. I mean, I already made all my points. Like I know the potential that Converse has, and I've been in their shoes. My team has been in their shoes. Like maybe that wasn't the case for them. Maybe they weren't hard prepping for Harrisburg that weekend, or maybe they did were prepping for them, and they just got mentally boomed afterwards and had to face St. Clair next, and they just fumbled the bag. So I'm gonna put Converse number 1. I'm a fan of their team too. So it's a little biased, but I'm putting them number 1, and then
I've also met Converse in person, and they're great people. So
Mhm.
so there's bias there.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I like the dudes. They're all they give us shit on Twitter, but it's fun bickering back and forth with them and against them all the time. So and then I'll probably UCSD is just always unpredictable. Like they're probably the most top level team that's the most unpredictable this season. So I really can't put them number 2. I just can't. So I'm gonna just put St. Clair. Just that should be a given. Honestly, they should be able to make it out of these groups.
Okay, I'll break it up. So I really like Converse. I think Converse is good. I honestly think that last match between Converse and St. Clair probably was coin flip territory that could go either way. And if Converse really turned it on, they would win. If UC San Diego really turned it on, they would win. But I don't think either of those are going to happen. So I'm going to put St. Clair as winning that coin toss and the number 1 team here. And then behind that, Converse can play as normal and get second or maybe first, but at least second in that group, whereas UC San Diego has to turn it on, and I'm not a believer.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
I'm trying to see something really quick.
Yeah,
I'm
no
trying
worries.
to look for the round robin schedule because I know that's out, but when the actual matches are taking place.
Sure.
That could be
know.
significant for sure.
Because
I don't have access to those.
If Converse plays St. Clair early, I think Converse wins. But if they play them late, I think St. Clair's win. So this is hard.
No, it's tough, 100%. It might even be like a situation where we were talking about earlier, where St. Clair might beat UCSD, and then UCSD might beat Converse, and then Converse might beat St. Clair. It could even just go like that, honestly. It could be a toss up between those three.
I could see that for sure.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna say Converse first and St. Clair second. I think that is how this group goes.
I said it was a hot take, and then 3 of the 4 of us agreed with me.
I do think that the Converse team, I think that Quicks can really turn it on for them. I think that that's just a really, really strong roster in general. I don't know necessarily the St. Clair background with the team, if they have a dedicated Overwatch coach, or they have people to kind of work with them and get them high level scrims and all of that. I think that Converse has the higher ceiling than St. Clair, but right now they are closer to their floor than their ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna call Converse 1, St. Clair 2, and not be surprised if UCSD gets out.
Yeah, that's kind of where we are.
So this is my favorite group out of all of them.
This is I think is going to be a really fun group, and I hope that we see some streams from these games because they're going to be really good. But now we get to the group. We go from the favorite group to the group that we had a little bit of a discussion on it, and then we were
boy.
and then we cut ourselves off. Like we can't
Yeah.
put our thoughts on this fully out there until we're on the podcast. Group number 5, just the biggest cluster of any of the groups. That really, I mean, St. Thomas gets out at number 5. At number 5 seed, they went 9-1, probably the weakest number 1 seed of every group here. And then you've got St. Louis, CIU, UIUC, Ball State, any of which, like, I see 5 teams that could be in basically any order right now, and no team that is like a true collegiate Overwatch powerhouse, which I think is where the problem is, for where like the overall like imbalance comes in.
This would be a cool invitational group. Make like a fun one-off tournament. Invite all of these teams, right? Have them own little bracket. I think that would be like you'd actually have really really good games because all of these teams kind of have something that is really good about them, and then all of them kind of have something that's a little problematic. I will say that like UST beat. They're kind of like that St. Clair in that realm. They beat all the teams they were supposed to beat.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
They didn't have any bad losses.
Ohio
They
State,
had a
Oregon,
decent
Utah,
schedule,
Oklahoma,
right?
or
Like
losses
if we
to Maryville.
even consider Ohio State to be 14. They beat 14. They beat a team. They beat 2 teams that are in that like 20 to 30 bubble. 3 teams in that 20 to 30 bubble. Oklahoma, who we said is a top 40 team. Delaware, who barely missed playoffs. Like they have good matches here. They did get a free, week 1 with just 2 teams that are kind of but and then only losing to Maryville, like that's you got to give them credit there. They're clearly very strong, but that also means too they didn't play a team that realistically should have been able to challenge them up until this point. So, yes, they were consistent, but anyone can be consistent if you're not playing any of the teams that potentially are better than you. The anti-Rutgers syndrome.
Anti-Rutgers.
Yeah, that's kind of them. I mean, we look at this team and we say, yeah, St. Thomas, based on our beliefs, based on roster, based on how they've sort of competed in previous semesters. I think we'd feel a lot more comfortable if we had a team like an Irvine or something that we knew really was a good team that was a little more tested. We'd go, yeah, that's fine. They get out of this group for free or relatively for free. But St. Thomas, well, we think they're good. It's pretty darn unproven, and all these other teams are really mixing it up. I mean, if you asked me, I'd say Illinois Orange is the second best team in here, but Ball State just beat them. And CIU has some interesting matches as well. And St. Louis beat Ball State. So it's really fun in this group. Now, is it good for the bracket? No, it's not good for the bracket. It's not good for the balance of the other groups. But yeah, this is a really fun group as a spectator to go. It's so hard to call.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where did they beat or where did Ball State beat them?
AVGO, Intel Inspires.
Oh, okay, interesting. Didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Damn. Yeah,
Now,
this is all over the place.
I do want to take a quick look at St. Louis because this is a team that really has kind of gotten themselves into the spotlight over the last couple weeks. Again, we've mentioned this before, the loss to Georgia Tech is kind of a tough one because then it's like, okay, so we have to kind of base how good Georgia Tech is based on how good SLU is. That being said, they faced 3 bubble teams in a row with Ball State and Miami and I guess Kennesaw, and they did what they needed to do there. They are centered by Pascal, who's like a really solid support player, I believe, with tier 3 experience. They're definitely not a bad team. Are they number 12 seed? Good? Meh.
No.
Well, Paradox, I mean, the SLU faced your team, so do you have any comment on that?
So I'm actually looking right now. Like as soon as I saw that, I said, "Oh, we played SLU," and I'm looking in my results channel because we have a results channel with like all of our individual map scores. I don't see SLU listed in
Really?
my results channel, which I'm seeing that they lost to us and Georgia Tech in the same week. Did they forfeit those matches? Right?
That's possible.
I don't want to play devil's advocate in all of these. I keep saying, "Oh, did they forfeit?" No, but like in all seriousness, I don't see results listed for SLU in my results channel. So that is a possible. I literally just messaged Neb. So Neb, if you're watching this, go check your DMs. If not, like,
I think somebody from SLU is in the chat too. If you
Yeah,
can
they're
confirm
saying
if
that's
you forfeited,
yeah.
that'd be
he said
great
that they
for us.
forfeited.
Oh no! Somebody's.
Oh.
I think one of their members is in chat. So you can confirm that y'all forfeited those match against Fisherman, and I don't remember the other team, Georgia Tech maybe.
Georgia
Yeah, it was
Tech.
Georgia Tech.
Let us know.
So realistically, yeah, okay, they would have lost to Fisherman, but do they lose to Georgia Tech? Maybe, maybe not. But then they wouldn't play Ball State later. So I'm very curious with this SLU team, just in general.
Okay. Cohen, and I know Cohen, he's in my streams a lot. It was a 2-0 for Fisher, and the same
Okay.
is true for Georgia Tech, right?
Okay.
Not that it was a 2-0. I mean, if you can tell us the score, that's great, but that was played, right?
I mean, if one was played, most likely the other was played.
Likely the other was played.
He'll respond, but yeah.
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 Yeah, I just don't have it in my results channel, so I'm even curious there too.
Yeah.
So
So
just,
St. Louis are a bit of an anomaly, but then of course you have team again. So you look at the next three teams: CIU, UIUC, and Ball State. All teams that have been ranked in OWCRA at one point or another. All teams that have been in like the bottom 5 and then fallen back out, and teams that could definitely turn it on over the next couple of weeks. I think UIUC, I forget against who, but they have gotten some pretty solid wins in the last couple of weeks. I think Temporal would probably know.
Oh, I've always got him. Yeah. So as we're looking at UIUC,
yeah, they beat
Bellevue.
and Miami.
They beat Bellevue.
They actually beat CIU a couple weeks ago. So that's
Bellevue,
important.
Miami, Ohio, UCSD at some point, Toronto, and CIU. Their losses that I care about are to Boise, Redbirds, and Ball State. The Ball State is really dragging that down, but they have some good wins.
This is true. I think there's just a lot of coin flips in this division. It's really tough. It's a really tough one to call.
I'm wondering. I'm gonna go look up. All right, so CIU finished their NACE group 7-0.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I'm interested to see where kind of they are. UIUC also finished their NACE group 7-0. So both of those teams are out. They're both in that playoffs for the Open Premier portion of it. But I mean, to point this out too, Oklahoma finished 7-0, right?
Yeah.
But that would mean CIU beat like Cornell, UCF. Those are really the only good two teams I see of note from those two groups. And then UIUC had to play NYU Ultraviolets, so they have beaten Ultraviolets. SFA, so that's been a team that we've talked about a little bit too. And they did beat Alabama Crimson, who did make wow. They're very even. I didn't even really notice this until now, just how even kind of these two groups are, or kind of those two teams are. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I know CIU had the short end of the stick in fall NACE because, Fisher ended up getting forfeited week 1 in NACE, which made us play the LCQ, and we eliminated CIU through that LCQ, which was really unfortunate. But they have the same exact players that they had last semester, so it's like both of these teams have been playing together for almost a year. Yeah, honestly, this is... Oh, I thought that was going to make it easier. I was hoping to find that needle.
I'll tell you this. Since I'm a Cincinnati guy, and CIU did lose to Cincinnati in the Kentucky qualifiers. And listen, I love my guys from Cincinnati. They're not a top 20 team. I think losing to Cincinnati is a pretty solid blemish on their resume. At least when thinking about them in comparison to teams like St. Thomas, UIUC, Ball State, and SLU, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair.
We have not. I don't think we've touched too much on Ball State yet. We did a little bit, but then they're also the kind of the big team here. They have kind of, unfortunately, like when we started off, we thought they might have Rymazing on their roster, which would be a crazy good DPS to have. That would catapult them to like probably perennial top 20 status. Unfortunately, for one reason or another, their DPS cannot stay in it, but they do still have some really solid players on their roster. They do have to, of course, overcome that loss to SLU earlier on in the season if they want to make it out. They lost to Fisher Navy as well. It's tough. I think they're a team that's slumping a little bit right now.
And they've lost to Louisiana State University.
Was that in Kentucky?
Yeah, that was in Kentucky qualifiers.
That's kind of a tough one, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think they are still a pretty significant player in this group.
No, they are. They absolutely are.
Without Rymazing, that just becomes really, really hard for them. I think that makes that out of my brain, the 5 that I'm kind of looking at in this group, I think it now goes down to 4, just realistically. Now knowing, I was wondering where Rymazing was because I noticed he's on their ECAC roster. I'm trying to look in the, getting in there, just looking in NACE to see if they are even in NACE. I don't think they are because I haven't seen them, but that's another one where it's like, where are they, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they are actually in NACE, so.
They made it to second place in the CECC Midwest qualifier, but that spot kind of opened up for them because during the bracket stage on the second day, a lot of teams ended up having other things and forfeiting. So kind of take that with a grain of salt.
I don't count any of the bracket,
Mm-hmm.
the seeding, the event to seed the event that's going to seed the next event. No,
So
I'm
wild.
not doing that.
Yeah.
Like that's just that. I don't count the Boise loss to UCSD. that doesn't make any sense. Like they were already in the groups and you're already number 1 and number 2. Like you're seated opposite sides of the bracket. It literally doesn't matter who's number 1 or number 2.
Yeah.
Literally, it just makes for a better content and storyline. Congratulations, Boise, with the big upset in Grands, right? Like no, like come on. So for me, fine. They're number 2. They still made the event. Congratulations. It'll all be about, who actually makes the land, who gets that seed to Arlington. For me, though, like looking at their roster now, yeah, that helped. That helped me. I don't know about you guys, but it helped me. So
yeah, absolutely. I think any other thoughts before we start putting our Preds in?
I mean, I didn't really share much, but it's pretty tough. I mean, the only thing, one of the things I was looking at, like you said, Ball State beat UIUC Orange, like recently, in AVGL, and UIUC also beat UCSD, which is a decent win, but they still got beat by Ball State, so it's tough. And Ball State hasn't been doing like super like amazing, so those two teams are. I don't really think they make the second spot. I think it leans more towards St. Louis, to be quite honest. I think that they've been on the come up.
Sure. So, Luey, then we'll go ahead and start with you for your Preds. Because you just mentioned St. Louis on the come up. Is that St. Louis and who?
So yeah, so St. Thomas my first, and then St. Louis, both the Saints.
Fair enough. Well, you got 3 Saints in a row. Look at that.
Wow, fancy.
I'm going to agree with you. I think St. Thomas is going to do what they need to do to come out first in this group. Second, I am not going to go St. Louis. I'm actually going to go down to Illinois Orange. I think they have been putting together pretty solid wins as of recently. They do have to overcome the loss that they took against, I forget if it was Ball State or SLU.
Ball State.
Yeah, they lost against Ball State. I think in a coin flip where UIUC is really like they're gonna turn it on. They know that it's for top 16. I think they have the talent to be able to make it out of this group. I think they're gonna come out second place here.
I'm going to go with the same. St. Thomas gets the top spot just because there's not enough to make me believe that that's going to go otherwise. I'd love to see more proof for St. Thomas, but we're not going to get it. I think they beat what's here. In fact, the only team I think that could really challenge them is Illinois Orange, and therefore I'm giving Illinois Orange the second spot. I know they just lost to Ball State, and a part of me really does want to put St. Louis there, but based on what I've seen, the gameplay, the rosters, I look at that and say, I don't think we see a repeat. I think Illinois Orange is going to handle Ball State, and I think they're going to handle them pretty handily, to be honest, in the rematch.
Yeah, I'm trying to look it in. I'm slowly eliminating teams from that nice group. I think so. I'm going to agree with everyone. With St. Thomas number 1. I think that is the very clear pick here. I think St. Thomas, they consistency, got to that top spot. They're going to earn this top number 1 spot. We'll talk about what that means in the bracket stage when we get to like group number 6, because bracketology, right? I think looking at it, I'm gonna put my number 2. I think I'm gonna go SLU for number 2 here. I think
Okay.
that they are peaking at the right time. I think the Ball State loss to UIUC is what is pushing me down on them. I think they do end up getting third. I think CIU can throw a wrench in some of these plans, but just recent performance of SLU, how good they've been, performing in a couple of these other tournaments, I'm going to put them number 2 in this group.
I forgot to mention, but also St. Louis beat Ball State early.
Yeah.
Actually pretty recently this month, like 2 weeks ago. So,
Mhm.
like I think they rightfully should be number 2.
Absolutely. So we all agree on St. Thomas. We are split on number 2, though, between UIUC and St. Louis. And again, we have 2 other teams in CIU and Ball State who could come out of nowhere. So this is going to be a really exciting group to watch. Really interested to see how it goes out. But with our Preds locked in, let's go ahead and move on to group number 6. Luey, this one interests you a lot because there's UT Dallas there at number 27. You've also got 2 pretty solid players up top, UC Irvine coming in at the number 6 seed, Arizona State, who rocketed onto the scene last month, as well as Iowa State, who has been a bit of a sleeper pick for some people for a little while now. You have the 2 UC Stony Brook teams in here, Carnegie Mellon and Central Florida rounding it out, but we're probably going to be spending most of our time on the top 4 here.
Right. I honestly, sorry, bottom 4 teams, but there's like just no argument for you. I'm sorry. Like I don't think they're gonna make it out of these groups. And Iowa State, I would even add on to that group because they recently have lost Zeb and Z-Men, which were like the best players on their team.
Oh, I didn't know that actually.
Yeah, I heard one of our players is a good friend of theirs, and they're not playing for them anymore, as far as I'm aware. So Iowa State and the bottom 4, I don't think there's any argument for those. The top 3, maybe. I mean, my team faced Arizona State early on. I had Arizona State really, really high up. I even made that bold prediction, maybe like the last video, that they were going to be like top 10. But after facing them, I take that back because my team handled them pretty well. So it was an easy 2-0 for us. So I mean, I understand like an argument can be made for Arizona State, but no, the other 2 are just too like solidified and like based on the results and just like their history, especially UCI, who's always consistently being super, super fucking good. So I don't think there's any argument aside for the UT Dallas and UCI.
And something to point out, just before we even throw away those bottom 4 teams, I do want to point out Central Florida. I think of those bottom 4 teams, they kind of have the best shot here. They did lose to Iowa State when Iowa State still had those 2 players. I know who the 2 players you're talking about, Luey. They played during that last game, but now are no longer playing for them. Not only that, but Central Florida did make top 16 in the Open Premier Division for NACE just recently. They upset somebody who I had when we were going through group number 1, but that was an hour ago, so that's fine. My brain can't hold on to that much information. They upset CSUDH, who was the higher seed over them. So again, like not a crazy win, but they still did get an upset to then progress on into that bracket. So I think they probably come in like 4th. It's the consolation prize, but I do think like they are ranked a bit lower than what their actual record shows. You did beat them earlier though, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't think they finished bottom 4, but I think that they don't make it out.
Yeah, you opened their page and I saw that we faced them. I was like, oh my gosh, like so it feels like it's
Forever
been
ago.
ages. Like, yeah, you said that earlier about another team. You're like, oh my gosh, I opened their page. I didn't realize we faced them. I feel the same way. So
Apparently we played SLU, like,
yeah,
oh, sure.
Who knew?
sure. Yeah.
So I look at this one and I do think that the top 3 teams are leagues ahead of the rest teams, but I also think there's a pretty big gap between team 3 and teams 1 and 2 in this group. So it's kind of a shame. I actually think this would be a lot more interesting if Arizona State had found its way into like a group 3, looking at that, which has a little more mix up, or a group 5. In this, I actually do think they probably are a top 15, almost certainly top 20 team. But there's no path through here. I mean, unless UT Dallas, which it's done before, just decides to go wild and drop and let UC Santa Cruz into top 8. I mean, I must be talking about a different season when it was last season when they let Utah through. Sorry, Louis, I'm taking too many shots.
No,
I
you're
know,
good. You're
but
good.
your team does that sometimes, and
Mhm.
if that happens, sure, Arizona State could find a way in, but UT Dallas has looked solid for the last couple weeks. They got
Yeah.
that recent win over Fisher. That looks good. They don't look like they're about to troll their way out of the playoffs. So I really just don't think
Mhm.
it's there. As for Central Florida, um, yeah, they're probably better than the 54 seed that shows up here, but they're probably the best of the 5 teams that I just don't think are worth taking a serious look at. But I just think the gap is too big.
Mhm.
They are the
Yeah.
best though. We did come to that consensus, so that's good.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, the gap between UCI and UTD to the rest of the 6 teams is way too massive. It's an ocean. Like
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I would have loved to see Arizona State in Group 5 or Group 4. I think that would have been really cool. I think they would have had like 2 really big prove it matches. Do you belong in this top 20? You know, beat UST, you know, show up versus UCSD, show up versus Converse or St. Clair. But
Right.
I'm sorry, it's UCI and UTD in this group. It's pretty clear cut, especially with Iowa State losing those 2 players.
hmm And as somebody who, I mean, I'm the coach of UT Dallas. I know my players want this more than anybody else, and recently they have shown that with beating Fisher and the Boise match. That was a whole other thing, which whatever. But
Drop it.
that match was actually super close. It was 1-2. Like we could have easily won that match for sure, but things happen. So I think my team has just been on the general trend of going up right now. I know that they fumbled in the past, but I think I'm very confident. I don't think I'm very confident that my players have figured out how they want to play and what they want to play. So all my
Yeah.
players are hungry to beat. I think they even take it over UCI. I mean that's a hot take, but they've been on the come up. They took Fisher, which Fisher has always consistently been ranked like number 5 or number 4. They can take out UCI if they want to, and they will.
And I'll talk about this when we get to predictions too, like the secret sauce between the UCI and UT. Well, do we have anything more to say? Or
I mean, I don't have much else. I mean, I feel like you guys have covered my entire thoughts. I'd honestly just feel bad for Arizona State because they've had a hell of a season. They've been an awesome story, but it is going to be, in order to get out of this group, unfortunately, it's not going to be Arizona State like playing super. It's not going to be Arizona State. It will be UCI or UTD messing up that gets them a spot. And that sucks. That sucks to have to depend upon.
it could play spoiler to the number 1 seed in the group. That's the only thing I could potentially see. Does UTD troll and drop a map?
Sure.
See Arizona, right? Like, and okay, now it's map differential. Boom, right? There's those options. Well, actually, no, it'd be head to head.
No, it
so
can't because it's not a messy
it
enough
would be head
group.
to head. It wouldn't be 3-way. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
all right. Did they screw up somebody's map differential? Right. Like that's
Mhm.
the only thing that I can really see with Arizona State. But yeah, this group is unfortunately really clean and cut. So, but if I can go first here in predictions, my
Yeah.
big thing, I do want to talk about the meta. UCI is known for having their tank player play off tanks, and that is not this current meta. This current meta is very much about main tanks just kind of coming in and being the big beefy boys that they are, right? And I think that is the difference maker where UTD is going to get out first in this group and UCI gets out second in this group, just because I think the meta really suits UTD right now. I think that UTD has a little bit more diversity within that tanking position, as well as the better DPSs, and that's going to be the huge difference maker between these 2 teams, unless UCI can really pick it up in that position.
Yeah.
I imagine you're probably in a similar boat, Louis.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar. UCI, I did watch their match versus Northwood recently. They did good. I saw that they played Junker Queen. I'm so used to seeing Romani on Hog. He's one of the best Hogs in A ranked. So, but he actually plays Junker Queen. So, that might be. I would say that's probably a better comp for them to run. Like they definitely should not run Hog against us, or they're just gonna get destroyed. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Like I said, I made my previous points that my players are hungry to win this, and I think I'm very confident in their ability to, as long as they, previous semesters, there's been outside factors that have, caused us to fumble the bag, but this semester, I really, really, really believe that we have figured out what we want to play and how we want to play. And the meta being a factor on top of that as well, I think we take it number one.
I am personally going to go ahead and just do the flip here. I think that UCI UTD very much I think it's a pretty coin flip sort of match. I think both teams could easily come out on top. I do agree these are the two best teams that are gonna make it out here. I'm mostly putting UCI first to be a contrarian because you both put UTD first.
Yeah, for the content.
I'm going to join you in being a contrarian. I do hear the argument about the meta for sure, but UCI has just more consistently been playing in this territory. And UTD, absolutely recently, it's been solid, it's been good, but that's a team that's also liable to go off the handles and have a little too much fun, etc. And I don't think that's fully solved. I think that'll be somewhat controlled by this is playoffs, we know who we're up against, etc. But I think we're going to find better scrim time from a team that's taking all of their scrims more seriously, for example, heading into this. So I am going to put UCI on top here. I definitely can see the Comets winning that. They absolutely have the power to do so. But I'm slipping in a UCI here, which holds up with previous power rankings.
That's fair.
And I know we talked about this a little bit off camera, and I want to start bringing this up too, is looking at kind of the further down the bracket stage. The team that gets number 1 in this group plays the number 2 from group 3, which we have as like Ohio and Bellevue, two teams that have been slumping. Most likely that number 1 seed they should automatically win versus Bellevue and Ohio. But then the big thing is that they would play the winner of St. Thomas versus the number 2 seed from group 4. Which, again, both of those teams, they're kind of in that like 10 to 14 range. So you see, whoever takes this group has a very, very nice path to top 4 winner side. So, or into the semifinals winner side, whatever you want to call it, which is a top 6 finish overall. So like getting out of this group number 1 is so important, because then otherwise you're playing Harrisburg round 1, and that is more of a coin flip. Even though Harrisburg has been known to have issues with playoffs, losing to Rutgers in the fall, still like getting out number 2 in this group is way harder than if you get out number 1. You have the easiest path out of all of these brackets.
Absolutely. So that UCI UTD match is going to be super important.
Yep. I hope it gets broadcast.
I hope so too. Luey, get on that.
Yeah, I'll get on it.
UCI, don't hide your VODs. Anyway.
Dude, for real. I feel like I never get to watch them. They only
they pull them down like immediately after.
Oh my gosh, it's so UCI, if you're watching it, it's so frustrating following y'all sometimes, especially previous seasons when y'all would only compete in the collegiate championship. Like we can't figure out where y'all stand because y'all just never keep your VODs up or just post them or anything. Like it's so frustrating.
They only play in ABC now. They dropped out of NACE. They were in NACE last year.
Yeah,
but they no longer play in NACE Open Premier nor Varsity Premier. So it's like the only time that we ever see UCI play is in ABC. And I mean, they always show up. Don't get me wrong there too.
Yeah.
But like this is my match of the group stage. Is the UTD UCI. This is the most important and the best match out of every single match that we're going to see groups 1 through 8. Period.
Yeah, definitely the highest level match to pay attention to.
Yeah. Last thing I want to note is, we always need content in collegiate, so please broadcast. Literally, my players will stream every single game or scrim. We do not care. It's collegiate. We're here to have fun, right?
You just have to run faster. It's good for your program and it's good for the scene. Other teams can see what you do. Yeah, that sucks. Now run faster. Other teams can read you. Now try harder.
Exactly.
The scene needs it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your program does too. But
yeah, and y'all have a lot of interesting players, and I'm sure a lot of people would love to watch. So, make it happen.
Yeah, total agreement. More streams is always better. And hey, if you're looking for a caster, I'm available. I'm around.
Love it.
From the Luey group to the Paradox group, I feel so sad because I think it would be so cool to have 2 Fisher teams in the top 16. We've never had a school have 2 teams in the top 16. I think you had a legitimate shot. and just unlucky seeding put both Fisher teams together in with Rutgers. That's a tough one.
I just knew this was gonna happen. I swear, like every season, there's always like one group that has both their JV team and their varsity team. I swear, it happens like
Was
every
it
season.
Rutgers
so.
2 seasons ago? And
Yeah,
Rutgers
I think it was
team was
Rutgers,
like a
like-
real threat 2 seasons ago too.
Yeah,
their
like-
JV team. So
What do you know?
Just-
It's actually tragic.
Immediate hot take too. They could have gone into 5 of the 8 groups and gotten out very, very easily. Literally, like I would have group 1 through 5, right? Navy honestly takes the 2 seed in like any of those groups, in my opinion. Just I'm hot on my Navy guys. I love all of my students and everything, but like it was like, all right, group 6, 7, and 8 just makes it really hard. I'm still gonna put them in the prediction because I have to, right? Like
you're gonna have to sell me on how they get through group 4, but okay.
Yeah, group 4.
Yeah.
They've played very competitively against St. Clair. They have played well in scrims against UCSD, and they've also played very well against Converse. I actually think they could make that upset and make number 2 in that group.
Okay, I mean maybe it can happen, but that's definitely long shot territory. Anyway. Okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's an offline discussion.
So,
Fair enough.
As we get closer to the end, it does kind of start seeing like, oh, so like at group 1 we have seed 1 and seed 16 topping it off. Now we have seed 7, 10, and then down the 23. So now as we start getting to the end, it starts getting more like, okay, can anyone else here take down the Rutgers varsity team and the Fisher varsity team? And in all fairness, I think Fisher, Navy, UCLA, Washington are all teams that have that potential to, at the very least, make it competitive against them.
Well, Washington might believe that they do, but
Well,
really?
Washington, yeah.
You show me Washington take down Fisher, and I'm
Washington
gonna be giving ParadoxMuse a call.
Washington lost to UCLA. Washington lost to who else? Harrisburg and UTD.
No, I do not think they have any shot. Period.
I don't think they have a shot of making it out. I think they have a shot of being the overlooked team that maybe takes a map off of one of the other teams.
Nah, I don't think so.
No?
No
Okay.
chance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe it's just because I'm the one who gets all the Twitter notifications from them when they comment on.
I said it. I said it. I think I said it last podcast that we put them in their place, and we sure as hell did. So
and I would say
they're not that great.
Same thing about UCLA. I mean, yes, UCLA beat Northeastern. I don't think it would happen again, but hey, it happened. We'll own it. I have a decent measure for what that team can do. We've seen the rest of their records where it's been kind of messy. Lost to Penn State there, as you can see there. There's no way that team... I know how Fisher plays. We've scrimmed against Fisher. We've scrimmed against Rutgers. Those teams play at a faster pace than a UCLA could handle. Like, UCLA will not be able to touch them. And same with UW.
I agree.
There it is. This is... Unfortunately, it seems pretty open and shut, right? I mean, I don't think...
I mean, the only question is who's 1 and who's 2. And,
yeah.
We can let Paradox go first because he has to... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, listen, I can't not put HRFM first and Navy second. I literally can't, right? Like, I gotta represent this
You might get fired if you don't. I understand.
Exactly, right?
There you go.
However, my gut is telling me that it is, HRFM number 1, Rutgers number 2, kind of coming out of this group. Maybe, Navy, or maybe Rutgers, has to forfeit during Navy. Who really knows right there? Honestly, like, my guys really has the expectation. We also have a bit of a roster swap going on with Navy in general. We have a student who is going to be being benched for the team just for personal reasons right now. So big roster swap right before playoffs, right? Doesn't look great. However, like, the game that they did play with their full roster versus Rutgers, I do want to point out that Navy and Rutgers did play. That Navy's 3 losses are Rutgers, Northwood, ISU, and the main team's losses is Northwood and ISU, right? Like, those are when those are your losses, like, those are all really, really solid losses, all good losses.
Oh, for sure.
The Navy versus Rutgers match was really close. They did take points off of them. I think one map was either 3-1 or 3-2 for Kings Row, and then the control was 2-1 in favor of Rutgers. So, I mean, like, they were competitive in those games. It's not like it was a complete wash or a complete one-sided match. But I got to pick my 2 guys, right? Like, love those kids. They mean the world to me and everything, and honestly to the program and what they do. So, but honestly, if we took this a little bit more like seriously, I still think my main team makes it out number 1 in this group.
Interesting. Cool.
Absolutely.
I want to make a quick note, if you don't mind if I go next.
Yeah, go ahead.
From before I make my predictions, I was actually surprised to see UC Riverside again. I haven't heard that name in a long time. Like back when I was competing back in like
Rolled,
20.
baby.
UC World was great.
Yeah, when I was competing in like 2021, I remember them in playoffs, and it was a pretty close game. So it's good to see that they're still sticking around a little bit with their players. I don't know if that. I think I recognize maybe like one or two players from years ago, but yeah, I'm an
Nice.
old man now, so it's been a minute. So um, yeah, it's cool to see them around, and so same thing for South Carolina. I remember them being like decent back then as well. So pretty cool. But for my predictions, I guess. No, it has to go to Rutgers. I mean, I don't know why. Like people just like are like, nah, like the top three are still the top three. Like this team has beaten two of the top three. Like they have shown that they can handle the big boys easily. So for all those people that are sleeping on Rutgers, don't sleep on them because they're just gonna dominate this playoffs. I think so. Rutgers number one for me, and then yeah, Fisher, yeah, their main team number second. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see those matches, and I'm excited to see how Rutgers does in the playoffs. I'm hoping it'd be cool to see them face Northwood and really, really, really solidify their name out there. But I don't know why that's an argument anymore. Like they literally beat like two of the best teams, and people are like, nah, Rutgers is like, they just number four, like this and that, like these factors. A win is a win. That's just that's just how it goes. Like they had subs, whatever. Like a win is a win, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to both agree and disagree with that. A win is a win. We absolutely have to look at wins. Those absolutely are real and have an effect on where people are placed because it shows how random a team is versus not random, etc. And you're sort of when you're looking at power rankings, you're thinking about your predictions of how is a team going to do if they go against each other. The past definitely matters for that. I do think Rutgers number 4 is the right place for them personally, but it doesn't ultimately matter because Fisher is not in that number 4 spot. So I'm going to come out of this with Rutgers on top, Fisher in the second spot. Fisher did just take the loss to UTD. UTD is a great team, so it's not like
Mm-hmm.
that's some embarrassing loss by any means. But Rutgers just picked up 2 wins over 2 of the top 3 teams. And yes, the top 3 teams, they have someone having to sub in for an off roll and maybe they trolled the first map. That maybe works for one of your opponents. If you can catch 2 opponents doing that, I just don't care. You're taking advantage of those opportunities when you're there, and very few other teams have shown they can even do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is extremely fair. I think that at this point in the season, now that we have seen the wins that Rutgers has gotten, there's just no shot they're getting overlooked anymore. Teams are going to bring their best against Rutgers at this point because now it has been established how big of a threat they can be. And they've earned that. They've absolutely earned that. Because of that, I've been going back and forth. I do agree Rutgers, Fisher, HRFM get out. I am going to give the respect to Rutgers because of the wins that they have on their resume. I think Fisher is going to bring everything they have against Rutgers here. I think they absolutely could win that matchup. I think at this point, I think Rutgers has finally reached like that point of notoriety in their career where teams are now going to take them 100% seriously every time they go up against them for the rest of the season. And so this is going to be a really interesting kind of group stage and postseason for them where, okay, everyone is now seeing you as this Goliath threat that you have now established yourself to be. Can you keep that up now that no one's underestimating you anymore? That's my question for them. I'm going to give them the respect they deserve, but Fisher could easily take the win there.
And something to point out too, whoever gets number 2 in this group most likely plays Redbird's first round, right, in playoffs. That versus playing Northeastern Scat or Florida, like that's a massive difference, right?
Huge.
You're coming out of this as the first seed, and you're going to play someone who is arguably a lot easier than the several of the teams that are in your group. I think that's just something to kind of really point to is both of these teams, Rutger and Fisher, they're going to be looking to get number one out of this group. I do also want to throw out that I think that Rutgers, again, a win is a win, and I am kind of on that boat. My big thing is that Rutgers has a very different game plan and can catch a lot of the teams that aren't used to cheese strats kind of off kilter.
Sure.
And I do think that my guys, when they're prepared for cheese, are one of the better teams that counters that. However, they can definitely get caught if they aren't ready for a certain character or a certain composition or anything like that. So it's like, as long as we prepare well for Rutgers, and I think that that's something that ISU and Maryville didn't do, I think that we would come out on top with this group. But like, all of these are valid. It's Rutgers and Fisher, and that's also a really awesome matchup that I would love to see. And again, getting out first in that group and avoiding ISU also leads into whoever gets number one in the next group in the second stage. That, again, you see a lot of rematches with Rutgers depending on where they get out, either if they get out first or if they get out second.
I know we're not talking rankings, but yeah, I'm not upset if people would put like Rutgers underneath the top three still. Like, I get that. I get like teams like that was a good point you made, like getting thrown off because they play like ball Zen comp or whatever. That's what they're known to do. So I get that, and I get that they were like down players or like I said earlier, like typically a lot of the top three teams like have that contenders mentality, like they don't really care, like it's whatever. So all those points are fair. All those points are fair, but people that argue that Rutgers is not number 4, you're just wrong. Like they're just proven. Like they should at least be like a monster team.
I think I can toast to that.
Yeah. Like they just proven. They proved it. They've proven it multiple times, twice already. So.
Yep. And so that leaves us with one group to go. And as much as I would love to have a 30-minute discussion about all the players in this one, this is probably the most open and shut case, I feel like, of the 8. I just don't see how anyone else here touches Boise and Maryville.
Yep.
No.
It's really just there's just no. I'm sorry. I mean, Penn State is a decent team. San Francisco State has proven both semesters this year that they can hang around. They're not Boise State. They're not Maryville. I think those are. It's really unfortunate for everyone else here that 2 top 6, maybe top 5 teams are in the group with them. That sucks. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. That's rough to be in this group if you're not Boise or Maryville. It's tough.
It's true. I think we go right to Preds on this one because there's no discussion.
There's just no discussion. It's really just.
Right.
I didn't know because when people were talking about like I think it was Paradox who posted like the predicted groups, I didn't realize that it was like you go from like 1 to 8 and then like 8 to 9. Like those are in the same group and it's like zigzag. I didn't realize that, so the other team just got super unlucky. Like that's just how it goes.
Luey's planning for which matches to tactically win or lose next semester in the final round. I'm kidding.
Oh yeah, now I know.
Yep. The sweet spot is 16.
Yep. It's so hard. I feel so bad for the rest of the teams in this group. Honestly, it's like, looking at a prediction of who's going to get third. It's their consolation prize, which honestly is also probably an open and shut case of like San Francisco State probably ends up third in this group. The only ones that could even fight for third is like George Mason and maybe Penn State, but it doesn't matter. It's Maryville and Boise, and that's open and shut.
I'll say I'm going Maryville 1, Boise 2. I don't know if anyone else is going to deviate from that, but you could put Boise 1 maybe, but I think if Maryville is taking groups seriously, they will sweep this one.
I think something to note for them is that again pro AM, so it's just like scheduling. If they're not able to reschedule something like not only Boise but like the other matches is like this is like there's like what 7 teams. If they have to forfeit some of these matches, that sucks.
Do they have how many people registered on the roster? Like, do they have bodies that they can throw in?
I mean,
because unfortunately, the gap is big enough that
I think they have a couple. I think they have a few. Yeah, so Iced is in there. as a
probably
potential
fine
player
then.
if they want to. Juby is not playing in Pro-Am. Is King in Pro-Am? I think so, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cyrus is probably going to be the sub for the Pro-Am team, so maybe he plays, but that's not enough players. Like they honestly like that. Like I really hope that doesn't happen. That would really suck, but that might happen. Like they might have to just forfeit matches, and they might not even make playoffs. That is like the worst like situation that could happen, but it could
I think
happen.
the pile-on that you get from the collegiate community, Boise won't do it because Boise will be blacklisted, quite frankly, by a lot of the collegiate community if they do that to Maryville.
Yeah.
Same thing with San Francisco State and Penn State, and those teams sort of know that that's the game. Some of these other teams haven't been in it long enough, but you don't not allow reschedules when it's versus good teams. I'm sorry, you just don't in the collegiate scene. There's a couple exceptions. If you really can't make a reschedule happen, sure, you can't make a reschedule happen. That's a thing. But if you try to trip up a team on a reschedule when you're both known teams, it gets around. The community isn't that big. But
Then I will be awaiting that because Boise is known not to reschedule.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Boise is very, very widely known not to reschedule. That is a big thing. And honestly, like that, I think that might be, the decision maker here in this group.
That would put it on full display. If for this match, Maryville needed a reschedule and didn't get it, that would very much put it on full display. And I think there would be some consequences for that. Obviously, not like you're not allowed to compete. Obviously, that's not an appropriate punishment. But I think there is going to be some degree of teams further down not letting Boise have reschedules consistently.
Also, keep in mind, coming first and second in this group, it's the difference between playing Northwood round 1 and playing a Toronto, Blinn, Oregon, Miami.
I would love the Maryville Northwood round 1. That would be so interesting just to see. That would be really even Boise Northwood is really cool to see. Like getting that rematch and everything, and Northwood really pushing for that playoff spot and all that, and really kind of putting their all into ABC. Again, Northwood doesn't. I know Boise beat Northwood in the fall semester, and Boise is better this semester than they were in the fall semester. But realistically, also, there's some caveats there, and I don't know. It'll be interesting. It is going to be. How does the Maryville Boise game turn out, and go from there?
Yeah, I did want to say, to be fair, Boise did reschedule with us, so I don't think it's gonna be a problem. I think they're all. I met the guys at NACE. I don't know about the whole rescheduling like controversy, whatever, but the players themselves are pretty good guys,
Yes.
and I think they will do it. So, not worried about Boise, but I don't know the other teams. Like, there's 6 other teams in this group, so I don't know what they're gonna do. Like, and people might have like genuine reasons for not being able to reschedule. So, that definitely is the possibility. But if everything goes right for like rescheduling and figuring that stuff out, for me, my prediction is going to be Maryville first, and then Boise number 2.
Fair enough. I'm in agreement with you there.
I think I've had a mix of predictions of like, I put Oregon in second in that group because of content, but also like, maybe Toronto doesn't play, and then I'm like, well, SCAD's gonna play, but maybe not Toronto, and then it's like, does this game get rescheduled? Does this game get forfeited? Does this game get? Maryville's gonna come out 1, and Boise's gonna come out number 2. I think that is kind of the safest pick in this group. Obviously, going to be watching that game really heavily. I think that how close Boise is to Maryville, or how close, one is to the other, is going to kind of determine on how does that Boise Northwood game turn out, based on looking at my predictions, right? Like, how does that Boise Northwood game turn out? And then even like Maryville getting the run back, potentially in that group too, if Rutgers gets out as number 1, right? Like, there's so many options for how that side of the bracket goes that it's gonna, and that matchup is just going to be so important for both of those teams.
Mm-hmm. I was another thing to note. Sorry, but if you were gonna base this off solely results, Boise did beat Rutgers, and Maryville lost to Rutgers. I mean, that's an argument you can make, but I do think realistically, like, again, like the whole contenders mentality, like, some of them were off rolling, missing players, like all that crap, a lot of outside factors. I still think Maryville able to show up. Scheduling is good. They will win.
And to put that caveat where that whole like reschedule thing kind of comes out from, there was some talk of the Rutgers trying to reschedule and Boise not, and Rutgers needing to play on laptops. And if
Right.
you notice that Rutgers didn't actually play the second game on Saturday against Maryville, they played it on Sunday because they wanted to reschedule because it was their spring break, and supposedly Rutgers was on laptops. When they played Boise, sounds like they didn't have the like full equipment to play on laptops, but when they played Maryville, they were. But they still beat Maryville on that same equipment, so it's such a mess that honestly, like, it's so hard to rank some of these teams until it's like, are you actually full trying? Are you trolling? Right? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, none of us, and sorry, Luey, but none of us even pointed out that UTD 3-2'd Missouri State or Missouri University of Missouri, right? Like that did just happen like 2 days ago. Right. And I know there's trolling and all of that, and so it's so hard when there isn't like a lot of the content being made. But again, just Maryville's so strong. They have Tree. If we're looking at full strengths of these two rosters playing each other, it's Maryville and Boise for me.
100%. Fair point.
Yeah. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put Maryville out on top. I'm going to put Boise in the second spot. None of these other teams can touch them. None of these other teams could even touch them if they were down a player. And it really just becomes a question of, hey, we look at this and go, are they going to get their match? Are they going to play it? Are there going to be interesting forfeits? That's the only thing that shakes it up. And I don't think so. I think they'll make it happen. The only way that match goes the other way is if players are just too distracted. And sure, that absolutely could happen. But Boise's a real enough team. It's a good enough match. I think they'll mentally be checked in.
Again, to reiterate my point, yeah, the whole like results thing and like all this other stuff, outside factors and stuff, everything can be accounted for. There's a lot of different points you can make, but again, I think we're all in agreement that like Maryville at their full strength, like wins that. They have literally Overwatch League level players, like almost all of them. So there's no question that they should win this 100%.
Absolutely. Look at us all agreeing for once.
Is that the only one we all? Oh my gosh, it is. It is actually the only one that we full agreed on.
And if I wasn't a contrarian and put Ohio State in Group 3, we would have agreed on that. But I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, Devin, I thought you were gonna I really thought you were gonna put Boise number 1 just to like be like, just for the content. I'm glad you did it.
I'm not that crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
My goodness, so the real top 16 was the friends we made along the way.
Yeah.
Well, friends, we have this. I thought this would maybe be a 90-minute stream. We've gone for 2 full hours here, and this has been incredibly fun theory crafting with all of you. And obviously it's honestly really cool to look at all of our presents they've all been made, seeing all the differences. And seeing all the different possibilities, and honestly, what actually ends up happening is most likely none of these. None of us are probably going to be 100% right, and that's like, and that's what's really cool to me. I think these next 2 weekends are going to be so interesting. Please, I'm begging you, collegiate teams, if you're watching this, stream your matches, please. I would love to watch them.
Absolutely.
Are there any closing thoughts from anyone else here?
We're going to get a Twitter graphic, right? Plug the Twitter.
The Twitter graphic might just be a screenshot of this.
Good enough.
That's good enough for me, yeah. I think this would be, obviously this is fantastic content, but also like, there's a lot of just fun notes here. So, this was great. This was really, really cool.
Yeah, and of course, it seems like this was... We had pretty solid amount of viewers, even though this was going on the exact same time as the Pro-Am, so really appreciate you all in chat for sticking around. But go ahead and take a screenshot of this. Make sure to tweet us when we're eventually wrong and your team ends up beating one of the teams on here, and maybe keep an eye out for the next OWCRA rankings that'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, there's a ton of updating we've got to do, so we're going to go ahead and get back to the books. And, of course, make sure to stream your matches. It'll really help us out in making those decisions. So, thank you all so much for watching. This has been a ton of fun with y'all. I appreciate all of you for coming on, especially this early on in the day. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, everyone. And for everyone who's competing, best of luck in your group stages. Have a good one.